The world is filled with random garbage made by hack morons. But today I'd like to focus on something good made by talented people. It's one of my favorite things to find something that shows off a distinct creative vision. The kind of stuff that inspires you to want to create something yourself. The kind of media that reminds you why you love storytelling. That reminds you why you give a shit in the first place. This show is so good it requires backstory. 2012. A different time. The first Avengers had just come out, people still liked Jennifer Lawrence, Josh Trank was looking like a promising rising filmmaker, but a lot has changed since then, including the state of dramatic TV series. Growing up in Ireland, most of what I had access to was British channels, which weren't awful for finding dramas on, but they weren't great. I mean, it was fine if the only TV you wanted was period dramas or crime dramas, or period crime dramas. Like, comedies, got those. Sitcoms and panel shows, like, whatever you want. But if you wanted a long-form drama, the period dramas and the crime dramas were the majority of your options. Unless you were willing to throw away your dignity and watch something like Doctor Who like some fucking nerd. But one channel that was actually making some different stuff was Channel 4. Channel 4 was kind of this beacon of unique TV content for me. They were actually making some interesting dramas that weren't just, hello, it is I, kindly old detective from the year 1940... Oh my god, what a coincidence that someone has committed a murder here right now in my presence. I can't believe this has happened to me again, holy shit. It's time to solve this case or my name isn't Miss Hercule Murdoch Brown. Shows like Skins appeal to a teenage audience and use that opportunity to touch on subjects of substance abuse, sexuality, teenage pregnancy, and mental illness. They would usually cast amateur actors, and the show features early performances from Nicholas Hoult, Dev Patel, and Daniel Kaluuya. Channel 4 was also the home of a little series called Black Mirror, so yeah, they were broadcasting some good stuff. But there was still no high-concept, long-form, story-driven drama on there. And to be honest, I never really expected them to. It's a public service network, how much can I really ask of them? And then in late 2012, a 15-year-old me saw the TV spot for a show that would completely blow most of what they'd made before out of the water. A show that actually delivered on a high-quality, high-concept premise. A show that came to be unexpectedly influential on the landscape of TV dramas for the coming years, despite its relative obscurity.
A graphic novel from the past opens the door to a dark future. Utopia. New drama starts 15th of January on 4.
Well, that was different. Utopia was definitely not your average British drama, and that was pretty apparent from that first spot. That music, that color scheme. The color is one of the most instantly noticeable staples of the show. Their use of a cyan, magenta, yellow palette mimics the look of a comic book, as well as invoking the feeling of kind of old Doris Day films, a seemingly optimistic color palette. This juxtaposes perfectly with a world on the brink of collapse in a fairly grim future setting, giving you the feeling that this is a world that's been engineered to seem like everything's going fine. Like there's some higher power that wants you to just ignore all the awful things happening in the world. Makes sense that it's a show about conspiracies. That phenomenal soundtrack does the same thing. Cristobal Tapia de Veer composed what is probably my favorite soundtrack for anything. I love them in different ways. The soundtrack alone is deserving of a whole video, but I'll try to sum up quickly just how amazing it is. Despite the show coming out 6 years ago, I still listen to the soundtrack on Spotify, like, a lot. Every year when Spotify makes me up a playlist of my top songs of the year, multiple Utopia tracks are always on there, every time. Like, not only is it just incredible music that sets the tone of the show perfectly, but it actually reflects the themes of the show in small ways. Similar to how the color palette invokes that feeling of an engineered reality, so does the music. The tracks are full of samples of nature sounds like birds chirping or even human breathing, but something sounds off about them. The birds are distorted, the breathing is labored. It feels like something organic has been manipulated to become mechanical. And reality being a mechanism masquerading as natural is central to the themes of the whole story. The fact that most of the tracks heavily feature distorted sounds from reality gives them this imperfect but alive sound. The tracks feel like living, breathing mechanisms of their own. And on top of that, they're just great tracks. It's just incredible. That's the point I'm trying to make, okay? And also a point that I'll keep coming back to is that this was totally different from anything I'd ever heard before. I'd never been exposed to anything like this. And this soundtrack just oozes creativity and a totally unique identity. And with just how well integrated into the show it was, shows the colossal amount of effort that went into it. Oh yeah, and then there's the actual show. Whenever someone recommends a show nowadays, it's so often accompanied with the disclaimer, it doesn't get good until like the 5th episode, or like, oh, but things like really kick off in the 2nd season. Now, I'm not saying that any show with a several episode wait time until it gets good is automatically bad, but that is a bad trait for a show to have, right? A good show should grip you in that first episode and immediately introduce you to the themes and tone of the whole show. Utopia says, yo, fuck that bro, watch this, and does it in the first scene of the first episode. This has immediately established Utopia as Mr. Dr. Professor Big Dick in the world of TV dramas. If you ever want to study a flawless opening scene to a series, watch this. I'm not going to describe it beat by beat because I do want you to go watch it, but it establishes the darkly comedic tone perfectly. It's an excellent throw you in the deep end scene that doesn't just fling a load of exposition at you. It just starts the scene and lets you ask the questions. Questions like, who are these guys? Why are they looking for this manuscript? What's in this manuscript that they want, or maybe that they don't want other people to see? What could be so important that they'd be willing to do this to cover their tracks? Where is Jessica Hyde?
Where is Jessica Hyde?
Who is Jessica Hyde?
Who's she?
And after the climax of the scene that clearly displays the stakes, it cuts to the outside and the iconic theme plays. And here's the most incredible part. Are you ready? You know all those questions the scene made you ask? The show actually answers them. This shouldn't be a big deal, but so many shows do this shit where they state a mystery and they don't actually solve it by the end of the season, and they just use the same mystery to get you to buy into the 2nd season. Cough cough dark. Cough cough everything J.J. Abrams has made. It's such a satisfying feeling to have a show that actually delivers on its premise so successfully that that first season can be easily enjoyed as its own standalone thing. The whole story is a perfect, satisfying arc. And we're not talking about some simple, dinky little show here. This is Utopia we're talking about. It's Mr. Dr. Professor Big Dick. The show is ambitious. The show establishes its whole world. It introduces a colossal cast of characters, and every single one is a unique and fleshed out being that actually feels like a real person. Even characters that are just around for a scene or two. And then the characters are jumping from here to here, and they're changing their hair, and they're learning new things. Some people know things, other people don't. And it's all so easy to follow. It's effortless. Like, this huge, ambitious story about conspiracies somehow never falls into the trap of getting needlessly convoluted in order to trick you into thinking it's intelligent. The show just is intelligent, and it's good at communicating that. And again, it was just something so unique because despite its large scale, it kept that contained British wit and charm.
Did you pricks give me heroin?
We had to.
Because for a while it had felt like most of what Britain was making for TV were just British attempts at American shows, and many British actors and writers had felt like this.
What I've said happened recently is, you'd see shows that were kind of like British attempts at Scandi dramas or British attempts at American sort of heightened drama, and I always felt like there was a bit sad that, why not have our own stuff?
Charles Dance said back in 2014, "We need to look at our laurels a bit with television in this country. I don't think enough risks are being taken in drama television in the UK, and I think a lot of program makers are underestimating the intelligence of the viewing public, basing it all on ratings. Just because 12 million people watch a pile of reality TV shit about something or other, that doesn't mean that's the only type of program you make. And there's great swaths of people who now don't watch any British television because there's nothing there worth watching. It has to stop playing to the lowest common denominator and patronizing people." Utopia feels like almost a direct response to that statement. It was intelligent, ambitious, and respected the intelligence of the audience. And on top of that, it was unique even from anything America had been doing. Utopia has a decidedly grounded and realistic feeling to it, and I think a lot of that is down to how good that main cast is. They're distinct and unique characters. There's even a solid child performance in there. But most importantly, they don't feel like heroes. They feel like I don't know, just regular people. It doesn't feel like good guys versus bad guys. And you know me, I love a bit of moral ambiguity in my shows. And as the series goes on, you'll see why this is so fitting.
I wanted something that was a bit more real, you know, a bit more... I wanted characters that felt a bit more like people I might know as opposed to heroes, you know. We have a tendency to take inspiration from films and from TV. So if you read a lot of TV scripts, they feel like other TV scripts. And sometimes that's very good, sometimes it's very accomplished, you know. But I feel like we should take our inspiration from life, which is much more interesting and much more diverse. I think we can certainly have colours of films and TV and works of art and stuff in there, but generally the thing that we're describing is life, not other TV shows or other films, you know. And so I think when you keep that in mind, you look for characters that have a reality and you avoid stereotypes. So I think really you're trying to look for complexity within those characters, often moral complexity. You know, we're never all good or never all bad. We're a mixture of both.
And on top of all that great writing and story, you have the technical elements. Everything from set design to cinematography to sound design just works so well together. The pages of the comic are these gorgeous yet disturbing pieces of art created by Paul Miller. The cinematography is an endless joy to look at. There are countless shots that perfectly visually represent what a character is going through, as well as countless others that give you the distinct feeling of being watched or that you're trapped in a maze. Even some outdoors shots manage to make you feel claustrophobic. It all adds to this intense radiation of paranoia the show emits, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So the show was pretty violent. It wasn't like non-stop violence, but when the violence happened, it was harsh and memorable. So a lot of the general TV audience watching it were a little surprised at some of the stuff shown, or at least implied, in the show. Ofcom received 44 complaints about violence and language, and Channel 4 themselves received about 28 complaints. Most of these complaints were about one in particular episode. You know the one. If you've seen the show, you know which episode I'm talking about. It's the one with the... I'm not going to spoil it, but if you've seen it, you know the bit. And you can see why people felt strongly about it. The episode was filmed like a year prior, but the date it was aired was only a couple months after a similar real-life incident, so that's a yikes. This kind of poor timing happens sometimes. Usually what the shows do is just not air the episode, so there's no complaints. Around 9/11, Friends pulled an episode that features Chandler making a bomb joke in an airport.
Prohibits any joking regarding aircraft hijacking or bombing. You don't have to worry about me, ma'am. I take my bombs very seriously.
What's interesting is that Channel 4 didn't pull the episode. This wasn't exactly a series where you could miss an episode here or there, so they put out a statement saying, it's on after 10, there's a big old warning before every episode, so if you don't want to see something that might make you feel uncomfortable, maybe go watch the Teletubbies or something, you big stupid baby. I paraphrase a little bit. But why was this violence having such an effect on people? I think the violence was particularly shocking just because of how realistic the rest of the show felt. This didn't feel like action movie violence, it felt real, aside from some questionable blood effects in some episodes. But the violence in Utopia feels grounded and realistic, and as a result feels almost repulsive at times. Even the many instances of implied violence were enough to seriously shake people. The writer and creator of the show has stated that the only violence he finds personally offensive is violence that doesn't shock you. And this makes sense. If you water down violence so that it's easily digestible and people won't get mad at you, you've done a disservice to the reality of actual violence. When someone gets shot or tortured, it should be hard to watch. And it's a big theme of the whole series for the act of killing to be this irrevocable act that permanently changes you.
Und das stimmt natürlich. Also das kann man ja nicht den ganzen Film durchhalten, aber es gibt einfach, wenn man der Wahrheit einer Situation nahe kommen will, kann sie so intensiv sein, dass man es nicht aushält. Ne? Also es wäre schon, wenn es eine schlimme Situation gibt, dass man die so zeigen kann oder auch nicht zeigen kann, aber das ist für den Zuschauer schwer erträglich. Problematischeren Dingen zuwendet, dann muss man sie auch in ihrer Problematik versuchen auszuloten. Ne?
But even from the critics who found it to be too violent, positive reviews were still flowing. High concept and striking visuals were praised aplenty, while the use of hyper-violent elements in the narrative were either, fuck yeah, nice, something different, or a bit much for me, old chap. Either way, it was a critical success. Although it didn't have this huge global viewership, those who were watching it were blown away. It was being recognized for its unique style, and it was causing some serious waves. Phelim O'Neill called it a massive step in the right direction for British TV, a stylish, intelligent and violent contemporary mystery. And I totally agree. Not only was the show extremely ambitious in its narrative scope and subject matter, it was actively advancing the standard for quality and creativity in TV dramas in Britain. Where do you even go from that first season? Well, if you were going the route of The Walking Dead, you'd fire the people that made it so great, double the episodes, slash the budget, and make sure it's a boring and watered down storyline so that it can keep trudging along season after season after season after season after season. Luckily, this isn't AMC, this is Channel 4, baby. The show is just as densely packed with stuff to chew on as before. The soundtrack is still banging and making those clever incorporations with the visuals. They're still making great use of their widescreen cinematography and striking color palette, only now the colors are actually worked into the set design rather than being achieved mostly through color grading as before. Utopia 2 continued the storyline, extending it in both directions, into the past and into the future. And they managed to get actors that not just look like, but also act like their future counterparts. Even the baby! Look, even the baby! It holds on to that tasteful, sexy 6-episode season length, while exploring new themes, new concepts, new characters, building a lot on what they had before. Those same themes of parenthood and family the first season explored are still present throughout. They also continue the themes of the impact of killing, but expand on it further. The difference between killing out of greed and killing out of necessity. Similarly, the transformative impact of both receiving and inflicting suffering. Many of the lessons the show is displaying around children can easily be applied to us as the parents of our own planet.
Oh, I didn't see you as a family man.
This is all about family.
With all the cards on the table after the first season, the second takes that opportunity to dive into the personal lives of the villains. It's extremely satisfying to always have the full context around nearly every character interaction. Basically, the show didn't just sit in the same spot, it continued to move forwards and do new and interesting things, actually building on the fictional world it had made and the crazy conspiracy shit that happens inside it. And it managed to weave these complex stories without ever feeling convoluted or nonsensical. Utopia was still, most definitely, Mr. Dr. Professor Big Dick. It was also accompanied by an ambitious marketing campaign that aimed to bring some of the show's fiction seemingly into reality. The motion ads of the all-seeing eye were just the start. A website was created where you'd sign in with your Facebook and a photo of your face. The network would then create a video where you would commit a bunch of crimes. This was a great way to show how much information about ourselves we give out willingly online, and also ties in creatively with things that happen on the show. They blurred the lines further by putting events that had many real-life conspiracies woven around them into their story. Most notably, the assassination of Ari Neve. Ari Neve was a British soldier and a member of parliament that was killed in a car bomb that was claimed by the INLA. In the coming decades, there were a few different figures close to it who claimed that it wasn't the INLA, but that he'd actually been killed by MI6 agents. Utopia fictionalized his conspiracy and featured a short story thread involving him and his eventual assassination, as they had also woven in some other significant events from those decades like the Winter of Discontent. This made the show the target for some particularly scathing reviews from people like Christopher Stevens, who seemed to believe the show was trying to be factual.
The obvious response is to ignore Utopia, the malicious and obscene conspiracy drama that claims a Gestapo-style security service was running Britain in the 70s and 80s. As television, it is beneath contempt.
I wonder if he ever got similarly annoyed at Christopher Nolan because Nikola Tesla never actually invented a cloning machine. Spoiler for fucking 13 years ago. But the show was still getting great reviews, the fans were loving it, the storyline was building to new and exciting places, and the show was getting recognised for its ambitious qualities. It was nominated for 17 various different awards and won an Emmy for Best Drama Series. It also won RTS Craft and Design Awards for cinematography, production design, effects, and of course, music. Utopia was continuously displaying itself as one of the best dramas on TV, a show that aimed to challenge its audience, a show where everyone in the collaboration was providing their full creative input. It was one of the most significantly ambitious shows in a while. Definitely the most ambitious show I'd ever seen at the time. Something totally unique that no one else was doing anything close to.
We were live tweeting the first episode of the second series, and I don't do Twitter, I don't do any sort of social media really, but they asked us if we'd live tweet, and we did. And I remember Mark was looking at Twitter and was saying it was extraordinary, like, there was so much on just during the broadcast of the first episode, and it was way more than had been in the last series, and we were really pleased. So that night we went to bed thinking, wow, great, the ratings were sorted, and we woke up to find out that the numbers were it was about a fifth, or about 20%. We really crashed, and we just knew there and then that was it. We weren't getting a third series because the numbers weren't going to work.
So, there never was a third season. After the news dropped, thousands of people, including me, took to useless petition sites to beg Netflix to pick it up, like they had Black Mirror. But it didn't do anything. Utopia was dead. There was a lot of speculation as to why exactly it was cancelled. Like, why were those numbers so low? Because the people who watched it loved it, but why weren't there enough people watching it? Was it that it simply wasn't something the average British TV viewer could get into? People like Christopher Stevens who effectively admit that they don't want any television that challenges them? And of course there is truth to this. Some random reality TV show will always have a wider appeal to a general audience than something that's focused and specific, no matter how ambitious the scope is. A sci-fi conspiracy drama isn't exactly casting a wide net on the public. That genre name alone would probably turn a lot of people off of it. And that younger audience it aimed for doesn't really bother with television that much anymore. I can't tell you the last time I voluntarily opted to watch something on TV. It was probably when I watched Utopia. I always felt that Utopia was a show that would make more sense being hosted online. Considering the role online plays in the show as well as the audience that would gather online discussing the events of the show, it just makes sense. But even though no one knows about it, even though it never got that third season, the impact Utopia had is noticeable. Relative obscurity didn't stop Mr. Dr. Professor Utopia from having an impact on TV dramas. You can see its tone in something like Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. Max Landis even said that he hired Cristobal for the soundtrack specifically because he'd heard his work on Utopia. And Dirk Gently is another show that's super creative and funny, and they cancelled it. And Mr. Robot, that is Utopia all over it. From the tone, to the cinematography, to the whole subject matter even. Mr. Robot almost feels like a spiritual successor to Utopia. I just realized this as I'm editing it, but Mr. Robot actually even uses 2 Utopia tracks in its trailer. It is a shame Utopia died, but in a way it kind of became this martyr for the ambitious TV drama. We lost Utopia, but then down the line we get a Mr. Robot. I'm not mad about that. The influence it had is noticeable, and the impact it had on those who watched it is definitely noticeable.
I mean, that was the thing that always made me the thing I was most proud of with Utopia. I mean, I don't think it's a perfect series by any stretch of the imagination, but, I felt very pleased that it didn't look like anything either on this side of the Atlantic or the other side of the Atlantic.
It's just a shame we'll never get to see where that storyline went after season 2. Or will we? Well before Utopia had even started airing its second season, HBO had ordered an American adaptation of Utopia. Now I know what you're thinking. American adaptation of a British series? But it was planned to be directed by David Fincher and written by Gillian Flynn. If anyone's going to be able to pull a good American adaptation out of this, I'm going to trust it to be them. And of course they were looking at Rooney Mara for the role of Jessica Hyde, who saw that coming. You know what? This could actually be really good. Cancelled. Basically, because of all the moving around and changing hairstyles and costumes and all that, Fincher was planning to shoot it in chronological order, which is expensive. So the production was cancelled due to those budget disputes. Everyone was released from their contracts, and that was the final end of Utopia. Or was it? As soon as HBO's rights to Utopia expired, Amazon Studios immediately snatched it up and ordered a 9-episode first season on April 19th, 2018. They better have something good to fill those extra 3 episodes with and not just stretch out the existing stories. Swear to God. Gillian Flynn is apparently still on to write. No word on whether David Fincher is coming back. It doesn't seem so. So what's my point with making this video? Utopia was really good, and I guess I'm just hopeful that the adaptation of Utopia, should it ever come out, reaches the same heights as the original in terms of quality, but also that this is the version that will be the one that reaches the audience it deserves too. I mean, it could be total shit. But if the American version turns out to be great, I just want to make sure I told as many people as possible how awesome this show is.
And I feel like there should be people that sort of write things in dark corners, and I'm probably one of those people, you know. But I feel that the Amazon version possibly is that, hopefully that version in the alternate universe that can reach more people, because there is a version of Utopia that can, I think, you know.